Hey everybody, Ray here. When I go camping, I have found that I significantly prefer using a quilt over a sleeping bag. The problem is I get those cold spots when I roll over and the edge of the quilt comes up and it leaves a bare spot by my back there, and I don't like those cold spots, and they're kind of hard to control. Well, Zenbivy has figured out a way to control that by enveloping your quilt within the inside of the Zenbivy sheet. Now, as I said, I already have a quilt, so I don't want to buy the whole Zenbivy setup. I want to be able to use my quilt with the Zenbivy sheet that I bought and create my own Zenbivy system for significantly less money. So if you want to see how I do that, stick around and I'm going to show you. Now, to create this system, you'll need a couple of things. Obviously, you'll need your quilt. You'll need to purchase the Zenbivy sheet. And then you need to find a way to attach the quilt to the sheet. And you do that by using some loops. Now, I bought these particular loops. I bought 8 of them because I need 4 on each side from Z-Packs. I think they're about $3 a piece, and they're adhesive on one side. And I saw somebody use these and it looked like they worked really well. Now, I think this first part here is kind of critical. You have to figure out, where do you want your first loop on your quilt? Now, my quilt happens to be 90 inches long, so it's a fairly long, wide quilt. The width is 57, 58 inches, which is about exactly the same as the Zenbivy quilt. The length, however, is 8 inches longer than the Zenbivy quilt. I saw someone who recommended that you put that first loop about 13 inches down from the head end here. But that's not going to work for mine because it's so long. So to get that measurement, what I did was I took the foot box and I laid that foot box so it just hung over slightly over the edge, the bottom edge of my pad. And then I came back up and said, okay, if that's where that needs to be, then where is the first hook? Here's the first hook on the Zenbivy sheet. So I need to line up my first loop with that first hook. Well, for me, that turned out to be about 22 inches. Now, you recall I said that somebody else had given a spec of trying to come down 13 inches. Well, that makes perfectly good sense if you're starting with an 80-inch quilt. So you might have to play with that just a little bit. But that's how I did it. Just put the foot box of the quilt over the end, the bottom end of your pad, and then work your way back up. Figure out where that first loop is on your sheet, then measure down from the top of your quilt, and that gives you a good starting point. Now, the genius behind the Zenbivy system is that they have the side of their sheet that comes up this way, 9 inches. And then what you do is you hook your quilt to that sheet such that the bottom edge, the bottom couple of baffles fit inside of the side of that sheet. And that's what prevents the drafts. It's really a pretty cool system. So if your sheet comes up 9 inches, I'm figuring that I want at least 2 additional inches of my quilt on the inside. So I'm going to place my hooks about 11 inches up from the edge of my quilt. Now, what I did was, when I figured this out, 22 inches from the top down and then 11 inches from the side up, then what I did was I just took a piece of cordage and I just taped it on there with some masking tape. Then each one of the hooks that come down this sheet are 8 inches from that first hook. So you'll have 4 hooks all together, 8 inches apart, spaced off of what this first one is set up to be. And in my case, it happens to be like just up 2 complete baffles. Now, once I put all of these pieces on there, all of the temporary loops, if you will, then what I did was I put it on the floor, I got in it, I rolled around in it, made sure that it wasn't too tight. made sure that the sides of my quilt did indeed come down below the bottom edge of that sheet side, and everything appears to be really good. So I'm going to go with 11 inches up on the side and 8 inches between each one of my hooks. Now is the time to put the Z-Pack patches on there, and those babies are going to be permanent. So that's why I wanted to play with this a little bit first with the masking tape and the cordage loops, and I would suggest that you try the very same thing when you set up your own quilt. Now what I did was I went ahead and connected my first loops from Z-Packs to test it out and make sure that they looked like they were going on okay. They look like they're on there in good shape. They look like they're spaced perfectly. They did adhere to the fabric really well. I don't think I have to worry about them coming off. They appear to be nice and firm. So now I'm going to show you how I did it. Now the first thing I did was to take my patches and sort of gently with some sharp scissors round off the corners a little bit so there wouldn't be anything sharp that could get caught in to pull these up. Then take a little marker, and you want to make sure that you're right on the center of where your loop needs to be. So I just put a little marker there, and then I can take my old loop off. If you take your scissors and just scrape the back of the paper here, you can then, it helps you separate the paper from the one-sided tape because it's really difficult to get off. Just be careful when you do that you don't scrape so hard that you actually scrape through the patch, because that would not be good. Then just carefully remove it, make sure that the sticky side doesn't double over on itself, because if it does, you got a problem. And then remove it. Remember that your loop has to be pointing down this way toward the edge of the quilt. And then what I do is I spread the quilt out as best I can to get it as flat as possible. Line up my loop with my little tick mark there. Keep my quilt flat. Then slowly make sure that gets adhered to the quilt. And it doesn't take very much. And those loops stick on there really well. I don't think there's going to be any problem with those coming off. Now when you do your next one, just double check that your loops are lined up with the hooks. I measured it to be 8 inches and it looks like it is right where it's supposed to be. So I can go ahead and make my tick mark. Make sure that corner's on there good. So I'm going to do the same thing with the next two. I'll make sure that I'm lined up, and then I'll put our patches on there. Okay, so here's the final product. And because I've got such a long quilt, you can see I've got an awful lot here to tuck around my neck and make sure that I keep those drafts out around my neck when I get in there. One thing that the Moon Dance quilt does have is it's got a little snap around the neck here. So if you choose to, you can snap the quilt around your neck like that and then cinch it up right around your neck. But I tell you what, I've got so much extra material here that I don't think I'm going to have to do that. But let's get inside here and we will put our other couple of hooks on. One, and of course now one of the things about the Zenbivy is that the hood allows for you to put a pillow up in here, and it won't slide out from under you while you're sleeping, which I think is a really cool feature. But here you go, this is the way it's going to work. You can see that my sheet is in there. My quilt is tucked up inside my sheet. I've got plenty of extra fabric here. I've got plenty of room down where my feet are on my foot box. And when I tuck this thing in under the hood, there are just simply very few opportunities for drafts to slide in on the sides here or around my neck. Now I'm predominantly a side sleeper, so this allows me to just spin around on my side like that, tuck this excess. I'm probably messing my microphone all up here. Tuck my excess under the hood, and I think that this is going to be very, very comfortable. Well, I think that worked out pretty well. It seems to be very comfortable. Now, I have the Moon Dance Long Wide quilt, as I said before. If I were to be starting from scratch here and I didn't have a quilt, I think I would just go ahead and buy the quilt and the sheet as well from Zenbivy. It looked to me like with fairly equivalent specs, the Zenbivy quilt was a little bit more, maybe up to $50 more, but not dramatically so. But for that extra $50, it was already all set up to pair with the sheet. I think this is really a cool product that they've come up with here. I'm really excited about getting this out and trying it because I really like to sleep with a quilt as compared to a sleeping bag. Hey, I hope this video is helpful to you. If it was, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. Happy camping. See you on the next video.